I think extremely interesting and relevant to our audience. I want to just unpack a couple of things and make sure that I understood some key points. So I think one point that I take from that is that, and I think I was saying this in a loose way, like regulatory and ethics. I think what you're suggesting is that as business and data leaders, we're at the forefront of looking at the ethics. Regulatory, in a sense, is ethics that have been codified so they're known, and they then have legal implications that we have to deal with differently. But we should take a view of ourselves as leaders in the industry as being the leaders of ethical use of data and not count on the regulators to do that. The regulators are going to catch up to us. And I think if I have that correct, without kind of calling anyone out, I think there's some very interesting and well-known examples of technology companies that perhaps have not done as good a job as they could have. And that's led to unfortunate results socially. And I think this is important, and reputational damage for the companies that have not done that. And again, I'm sure everyone can speculate about, who some of those companies might be. So that's kind of a big business social leadership point, which I think is absolutely key. The other thing, so that's sort of at a macro level. At a more execution level, I heard something very interesting too, and I want to just translate this into my own words, maybe for folks in the audience who are less technical. So almost like what you're saying is that there's a capability to look at better performance of algorithms and better ethics, almost like the way in a factory, I inspect my incoming raw materials to make sure they're the right quality. That's the moment of looking at bias in the underlying data sets. And then before I ship something to a customer, I put it through a final quality assurance step to say, okay, this meets all my standards. And that's the same way at an execution level that you've kind of coached and built a capability for your team to work with the algorithms and the underlying data sets.
Yes. It's very important what you say. We have to work closely with our teams to understand this. It's not only the regulatory point of view, but also the ethics. The ethics for me is very important in our job as a data management and really important, because we have a very important role in the today world, and we work with a lot of data. In the new normality, you will have more data, and we have to understand that the ethics related to this data management is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so interesting. And that's, again, given some of the challenges I think we've had, probably more in pure play tech companies than in, industries that are starting to learn how to use data. But you think, as these are kind of getting into mainstream business culture, that we can apply that, kind of right ethical framework and leadership. So I think that's amazing that you're doing that. Let me shift gears a little bit and kind of come back to part of the first part of our conversation, which is around, if I can distill what you said, and I believe this, and I've heard this from a lot of thought leaders as well, is, focus the data work on valuable business outcomes. Now, as we discussed briefly at the beginning, you've worked in a variety of roles within financial services and a variety of different kinds of companies. Are there some characteristics you think of companies and leaders that do data well? How can we predict who are going to be the winners and who are going to be the losers in terms of capabilities or mindset that those companies should be building?
Another interesting question.
Yeah, I saved all the easy questions, for my other interviews. Yeah, go.
Thank you very much. For me, the winners and the losers depends directly on how to use data and frameworks related to business in this area. Perhaps in healthcare and other industry is different, but in business, you have to combine this. And for me, it's very important to understand the behavior, the behavior related to the companies or people. That's implies that the data is an instrument, and the software is the tools, but the objective is to understand the behavior, the economic behavior, the social behavior of people, for example. For me, it's very important from the bank to understand the financial health of each client to improve its health related to the financial decision they have to make. If I understand the behavior of the people or the companies using data, is for me the winner path to the industry. Today at Scotia, we work very focused to understand the behavior of little companies and the behavior of people after the COVID-19, and you have to know that the behavior is changing in the last 6-7 months. We change, and our behavior change, and you have to understand this using data. In our case, it's very important to relate behavior economics with data.
So I want to stay with that thought, and just you can probably add more to this, but just for folks in the audience who aren't familiar with behavioral economics is the branch of economics that deals heavily with how decisions are made in the real world, and in particular with, kind of back to this a little bit to the ethics discussion, how different biases creep into decision making. Probably one that most people have heard of is a thing called confirmation bias, which is our tendency to like evidence that reinforces what we already think and ignore evidence that contradicts what we already think. So just to unpack what you were saying a little bit, if I think about, sort of the data mind and the data mindset, are you suggesting in a way that part of what makes a winning organization around data is not doing that, right? So actually looking at the data in an objective way and letting the data drive the decisions rather than, sort of some theory that some executive might have?
Yeah, exactly. You have to understand the company strategy, and you have to improve its strategy with data, with analytics, with machine learning, different tools. But you have to align the data strategy with the data, with the business strategy. It's very easy to say, it's very difficult to implement. And you have to work hard in this way.
Do you think in this, and this is a really interesting topic, so where in my professional career, where I feel like I've had a collision around this is where I've been involved in analytics work that, let's say, impact the awarding of incentives. So, I mean, I won't pick a real example, but you can imagine, right, that you have, say, or executives in a sales organization who are getting commissioned based on metrics, right? But then you do the work and you find out that the metrics are wrong, right? The metrics have been designed poorly, or say, back to our conversation, there's a bias in the underlying data. So does the chief data officer, or should the chief data officer over time, or even now, start to take on a role in looking at how those incentive systems are designed? Because just in simple language, what I found, like, mostly the reason that people fight about metrics is because somehow it's threatening their incentives, right? Yeah. Which is very much of a behavioral economics type of question. Yeah. I'm really curious what your view on that, kind of our role in even incentive design itself should be.
Yes, it's really very interesting issue. incentive for me is very, very important, because we have to understand that we are in the changing world, in the changing business, and we have to align the incentive to that change. I mean, when as a CDO, we have to understand that different players in the company have different incentives to do different tasks. If we don't understand that, in economics is related to political economics. You have to map in the company and identify which people have which incentives to earn its bonus.
That's it, right? Yeah, it's all about the bonus.
Yeah, it all depends on the bonus, and if you help each one to earn its bonus, you have a very friendly environment to develop the data strategy. And you have to develop different algorithms or data management, and you will have budget, and you will have quick wins because the different executives implement your models with data. And perhaps in our role, don't take care about the incentives. We focus on technology or different instrument, but not in the political economics of the related to the organization. For me, it's very important.
So just to play that back, you think that it's super important to understand the incentives and basically who's going to get what bonus based on what they do, but maybe leave, at least for the moment, maybe in 5 years we'll be having a different conversation, but this is still, and I think this is important, this is a relatively new function in large organizations, right? So in a sense, and maybe we'll come back to this, or maybe we kind of touched on this, there's a lot of education that has to be done, right? Everyone says they're data-driven, but almost no one is, has been my experience. Oh, we're a data-driven company, but then you go and you talk to people and they're like, they're doing their confirmation bias, they're doing what they've always done. So your view would be kind of with a pragmatic lens, we're doing the data work, we're doing the algorithms, we're looking at the data, we've got a story about business value. We understand so that we can have a smart conversation with stakeholders how that may impact their incentives, but maybe it's for the next generation of chief data officers to start playing, a more economic role in the definition of those incentives.
For me, it's very important. The next wave of chief data officer is related to auto machine learning. The technology will do the different that mentioned before, develop the algorithm. But the CDO, for me, is a role that is permanent in the midterm, I think, because you have to understand the role inside the company, to understand the people, the client, the customers, how to transform customers or client in customers. It's very important to understand the cost structure of the company and on how the data or analytics can improve its cost, improve the reuse of the cost. And it's very important to understand the soft skills of the role. No hard, no technology, not only technology, not only statistics, but also the soft skill, creativity, leadership. For innovation. For me, it's very important to a person who want to work as a CDO in the next year.
I think that's really a really important set of points, and it's because it's interesting. You talk to different people in different industries and different companies, and I think some companies view this very much as an IT, a techie thing. And I think what you're saying, and I very much, having worked with lots of companies, I prefer this construct that you're supporting, which is that a chief data officer is, it's a combination of understanding the markets, understanding the business, understanding data and technology, and providing decision support that kind of brings all those together in a unique way. That's part of why I agree with your thinking that this is a role that's I know there's been some writing on like, has the moment passed? My personal view, I don't think the moment's passed at all. I think we're kind of at the point where this role is getting better understood and better established in large organizations. And that, to earlier in our conversation, organizations that do this well are really starting to see the value and see benefits of having people who have that, kind of unique combination of skills. So I think that's kind of great advice for folks in our audience who are kind of mid-career and who would aspire to have a role like yours.
I think it's very important to understand the combination of data and tools. Perhaps you make a lot of value for the company with Excel. Perhaps in a spreadsheet you explain a very interesting point that make new revenue, and you use Excel and don't use algorithms. Excel, a spreadsheet, you explain that for top management, and they understand because they use Excel, and you accomplish an objective of data strategy.
Well, it's interesting. I think that's important, right? Because I think we haven't talked about this much, but my own experience, and again, almost all of our colleagues that I've spoken to are very keen on an agile approach and taking, kind of small wins that show value rather than do that. And that's another way that this is different than sort of traditional big IT, which actually formerly was my own background, that, you do projects that take 2-3 years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. The cool thing about the data space is there's so many opportunities. And actually, I think it's a good point. It's fine to start in Excel, right?
Yeah.
Do a lot in Excel. You can do a lot in Excel and Hive and NoSQL and a little Python coding. And, then if you're a big shop, you can kind of bake that into a broader workbench.
Yeah. Exactly.